The storm raged, a wild symphony of thunder and rain crashing against the city skyline. Inside his glass-walled penthouse, Ethan Hale, the cold and feared CEO of Hale Industries, was an island of stillness. His world was meticulously constructed from numbers, deals, and a heavy self-imposed silence. He was a man who had everything except peace. But that night, as the storm howled, his fortress was breached by a single, desperate knock. Knock, knock. A flicker of annoyance crossed Ethan's face. It was nearly midnight. Who could possibly be at his door? He strode across the marble floor, ready to deliver a sharp rebuke to whoever dared disturb his solitude. But when he pulled the heavy door open, the words caught in his throat. He froze. Standing there, drenched and shivering, was a little girl, no older than 6. Rainwater plastered her dark hair to her cheeks, and her tiny lips trembled as she looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Pee, please, sir?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "They hurt my mom. She's dying. Please, please help her." Ethan's heart, a muscle he thought had long turned to stone, slammed against his ribs. For a split second, his logical mind tried to rationalize it a mistake, a lost child who had wandered into the wrong building. But then, his gaze fell to her hands. Blood. A horrifying smear of red across her small, pale fingers. "Where's your mother?" he demanded, the question coming out rough, his own voice cracking with an unfamiliar emotion. The little girl pointed a trembling finger down the hallway. "In the alley, please," she sobbed, her small body shaking. She can't breathe. All logic, all annoyance evaporated. Without a second thought, Ethan grabbed his coat from the stand and followed her, his expensive shoes splashing through puddles. The icy rain soaked through his designer suit in seconds as they rushed into the dark, narrow alley behind the luxury building. And there she was. Lying beneath a single flickering streetlight was a woman. Her face was deathly pale, her dress torn, her body trembling with weak, shallow breaths. As Ethan knelt beside her, a chilling wave of recognition washed over him. He knew that face. He knew the soft curve of her jaw, the line of her nose, the same face that had haunted his dreams for 6 long years. "Lila," he whispered, his voice catching on her name. At the sound of his voice, her eyelids fluttered open. A glimmer of shock, of disbelief, shone in her weary eyes. "Ethan?" She breathed, her lips barely moving. It felt like all the air had been sucked from his lungs. Lila Morgan, the woman he had once loved with everything he had. The woman he'd lost when their worlds, one of wealth, one of poverty, had violently collided and torn them apart. And now here she was, broken and bleeding in his arms. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers shaking as he screamed at his driver to call an ambulance. But it was the little girl's touch that cut through his panic. She clung to his sleeve, her tears mixing with the rain on his coat. "Please save my mom, mister. I'll be good. I promise," she whispered brokenly. "Don't let her die." Those words didn't just break his heart. They shattered the very foundation of the man he had become. At the hospital, the sterile white corridors were a blur of motion. Doctors and nurses rushed Lila into surgery, their faces grim. Ethan was left behind, drenched, cold, and shaking in the waiting area. The little girl sat beside him, a silent small presence, her tiny hand still clutching his as if he were her only anchor in the world. He looked down at her, at the dark hair so much like his own, and a question formed on his lips. "Do you know who I am?" he asked softly, his voice hoarse. She nodded shyly, her gaze fixed on the floor. Mommy said, "You're the man she loved once. She said you'd never forgive her, but she still prayed for you." For the first time in years, hot tears burned in Ethan's eyes. A wave of regret so powerful it was suffocating crashed over him. He had spent years building an empire of steel and glass, chasing wealth and power, all while she had been out there, fighting just to survive. Fighting to survive with their daughter. "Your name," he said, his voice quiet. "What's your name, sweetheart?" She looked up at him, a flicker of her mother's light in her eyes. "Luna," she said. "Like Mommy's favorite song." Ours felt like an eternity. Finally, the surgeon emerged, his scrubs a stark contrast to the grim reality. "She's stable for now," he said, his voice low. "But the injuries are severe. She was attacked, and she lost a lot of blood. She needs rest, extensive care, and time. Ethan didn't hesitate for a single moment. Whatever it takes, he declared, his voice ringing with a newfound authority that had nothing to do with business. Give her a private room, the best doctors, the best care in this entire hospital. Just save her. Days bled into weeks. The CEO of Hale Industries was rarely seen in his office. Instead, Ethan's life revolved around the hospital. He arrived every morning with breakfast for Luna, who had started to tentatively call him Mr. Ethan. He would sit by Leela's bedside for hours, just watching her breathe, watching as life slowly, painstakingly returned to her pale cheeks. He read stories to Luna, his deep voice filling the quiet room, and discovered a part of himself he never knew existed.
Us.
One sunny afternoon, Lila finally opened her eyes fully. Her gaze was clear, and the first thing she saw was Ethan sitting in the chair by her bed, with Luna asleep in his arms, her small head resting on his shoulder. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice weak but firm. "You have a life now, a different world. People like me don't fit in your world anymore." Ethan shook his head, a gentle smile touching his lips. "You're wrong, Leela," he said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "My world was empty without you. It's just too blind and too stubborn to realize it, until a brave little girl knocked on my door and saved me." Her eyes filled with tears, spilling silently down her temples. "I didn't want you to know about her," she confessed, her voice thick with guilt. "I saw you on the news, saw how well you were doing. I didn't want to ruin your life with us." He reached out and took her hand, his fingers gently closing around hers. It felt like coming home. "You didn't ruin my life, Lila," he said, his voice filled with a profound certainty. "You gave it meaning. You both did." From that day forward, everything changed. As soon as Leela was discharged, Ethan moved her and Luna into his home. It wasn't an act of pity or charity. It was an act of love, of righting a terrible wrong. He stood by them as Lila healed, both physically and emotionally. And slowly, miraculously, the man once known as the heartless titan of industry began to smile again. He laughed. He played. He loved. One evening, the three of them were standing on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. Luna, who had grown comfortable and secure in his presence, climbed into his lap and wrapped her small arms around his neck. She rested her head on his chest and whispered, so softly he almost missed it, "Does this mean you're my dad now?" Ethan's breath hitched. He pulled her closer, tears of pure joy filling his eyes as he looked from his daughter to the woman he loved. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I am. I promise you I will never let anything hurt you or your mom ever again." Lila took his free hand, their fingers intertwining in a silent promise. And in that moment, under the fading light of the setting sun, the broken pieces of three souls finally fit together, creating a picture more beautiful and more valuable than any fortune. They were finally whole. Sometimes life breaks us, not to destroy us, but so we can be rebuilt, stronger and more beautiful, with love. The richest people in the world aren't those with the most money, but those who have someone to come home to. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that inspires. We'll see you next time.